When it comes to your audiobook, what do you do about copyright information? I actually had a conversation with a bunch of authors and nobody knew. So let's talk to everybody's favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to find out where we need to be putting copyright information, how much covers us. We're going to talk about it all. Let's jump in.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
When it comes to audiobooks, how do we handle copyright? Are we able to say a disclaimer up front? Do we have to read the entire copyright page? Does it go in the description? What does that look like for authors?
So if you're an author, obviously, you know the importance of protecting your work of authorship. The time, the energy, perhaps even the money that is invested in writing the book is arduous. You want to protect yourself legally in that front. It's no different in the same vein for an audiobook. So especially in a situation where you yourself are the one narrating the audiobook, I think you want to cover yourself on all bases. Mm-hmm. I'm of the mindset that too much is just enough. So having the copyright notice at the start of the audiobook and at the end of the audiobook is a great way to kind of bookend, no pun intended, the copyrightability of the audiobook that you're reading. And it can be very simple. This audiobook is protected under copyright attributed to K.M. Robinson in 2023. Having that visual or having that audible rather copyright notice is going to be great. In the audiobook description, also having that copyright notice is going to be valuable as well. No different than when you look at pretty much the first page or in like the first couple of pages of a book, you usually see the C circle with the author's name or the company attributed as the copyright owner, comma, the year. That basically it's the same thing that we're talking about here. But one thing I do want to kind of tell anyone that's in the audiobook space, in addition to having the copyright notice included in the audiobook, and in addition to having it in the audiobook description, you also want to treat the audiobook no different than you treat your books. And what I mean by that is, if you're taking your book and you're registering it in the Copyright Office, you're doing a great you're doing a great service to yourself, because what if someone infringes on the copyright? Now you have a fully registered copyrighted work. That's the only way that you can bring a copyright infringement claim. No copyright registration means that you cannot bring a claim. By having that registration, you're preemptively protecting yourself against any infringer out there who takes your work and repurposes it in some manner. And you have rights that are afforded to you, so you can allege some infringement of those rights in some capacity. Just as you do that for the physical book, you should be doing the exact same thing for the audiobook. Audiobooks are a work of authorship. They're protected under the Copyright Act of 1976. Audio-visual works or audio works, visual works, it's all lumped into that same category. So audiobooks, I think, should be fully registered in the U.S. Copyright Office. And once you have that registration, now you've not only cemented copyright notice by way of saying it in the audiobook and having it in the audiobook description, but now you actually have a certificate to show for it from the U.S. Copyright Office. And now at that point, if someone were to take the audio from your audiobook and repurpose it in some manner that is not, something that you didn't endorse, now you could, begin the process of pursuing a copyright infringement claim. You can send a cease and desist to the infringer, and you could say, hey, this audiobook is registered as a copyrighted work in the U.S. Copyright Office, insert registration number, cease and desist all distribution of my copyrighted work. Now you've really covered yourself on all bases, and you're good to go. Just one last thing, though. I think that sometimes people would want to lump their book, the physical book and the audiobook, as a lump sum compilation. I think it's better, for the sake of something like this, to have the book as its own registration and the audiobook as its own registration. And that's mainly because they're two distinct types of media. And with it, if either or both were ever infringed, the rights that are afforded to copyright owners are going to be different in a copyright infringement claim. So, for example, with a book, if, let's say, someone took pages from a book, reproduced it in some manner in another form that wasn't authorized by you, you could allege that there's a violation under 17 USC, a violation of the reproduction right. But meanwhile, if someone took minutes, even let's say hours, from your audiobook and repurposed it in some manner that you didn't authorize, now you can allege under 17 USC section 106. Subsection 6 has a little clause laid out about public performance of digital sound recordings, the digital transmission of those sound recordings. So now you've got a different right that wouldn't even apply to books. So I think that's why I'm advocating for having two separate copyright registrations for two distinct types of media.
That makes a lot of sense, and that is very valuable information. So if people are producing their audiobooks, we always want to make sure that we do have that copyright notice. We love the idea of bookending in a little line in the beginning, a little line at the end, and then having further information inside of the description as well. Friends, if you have questions on the legal side of the audiobook world, go ahead and drop those down below. Tony is coming back for upcoming episodes, and we want to make sure we're keeping you legally protected in the publishing space. And as always, if you've got further questions for Tony, you can always reach out to him on his social media. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at The IP Professor, and you can check out my podcast, End Scene and Entertainment Law Podcast, with new episodes dropping every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you have more questions for Tony, drop those down below. He's coming back for upcoming episodes, but we want to make sure we're keeping you legally protected, especially in the audiobook space. These are conversations we don't have enough inside of this industry, especially because when I did a public conversation about this, people didn't know. The authors didn't know where their copyright information was inside of their audiobooks. Most were pretty sure they hadn't even heard copyright information. So we want to make sure we're asking questions that we're not thinking to ask. Now's the time to start critically thinking about that. Drop your questions down below so we can get Tony to answer those in upcoming episodes, and follow along because every single day we are dropping brand new videos to help you navigate your writing, your publishing, your marketing, and to stay legally protected inside of this industry. And we want to make sure this is your most profitable year ever. So follow along. We'll see you in the next episode.